going to be Senzo, after which it's an open flow. We are open to dialogue. We can go back to asking Jochen and Shireen questions about what it is about being German that makes them who they are. Why Jochen is always eating that sausage in the lunch. So, Senzo, over to you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I will say good evening or it's evening already. Yeah? Oh, afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I feel like I'm being exposed. Where do I start? Okay. I'll try to be as brief as I can. Actually, for some time, I wasn't that proud to display that I'm a Zulu for a reason that may be similar to my prof. After my matric, I actually went to Rustenburg and worked there in a mine. It was like an exposure year. So I was actually forced to learn a native language there, which is Setswana. At the moment, I can speak it. So by then, I didn't know how to speak Setswana. I like to speak Setswana because I knew it from the, I used to watch Generations by then. I could see people speaking it, but when I got there, people assumed that I didn't want to know Tswana. So there are a lot of stereotypic things about the Zulu people being stubborn and violent because they've inherited that from Ushaka Zulu Gamalande. So it's really, so me being exposed to that environment, you feel like I'm not the person that the people display me as. And you feel like maybe I shouldn't expose that I'm Zulu. So a benefit to that, I learned all these other different languages. Now I can speak most of the South African languages. So just other people are even confused. When I get there and I speak Setswana and I speak Sesotho and I can try a little bit of Afrikaans. Currently I'm learning French. Yeah, I can speak a little bit of Shona as well, yeah. And so it was that thing, even though I'm like a language fanatic, but it was just to hide that thing. So I resolved to the fact that why don't I be referred as an African? Because the whole thing of you Zulu, you Xhosa, you Motswana, it kind of like create this segregation and other people feel low. I used to have a friend who used to speak Tsonga. Oh, I consider it as like my second language now, Tsonga. And Tsonga, there are a lot of people who speak it in Limpopo, but it's not as popular as Zulu. But he used to fall low because most people couldn't speak Tsonga. And due to that, the way he used to fall, I didn't like it. And then it made me feel awkward. And I think of this as well as like being white in this contest. That sometimes you can find that you don't want to be portrayed as racist, but because of the situation, you end up being portrayed as that. You know, so I know we've been in the situations like that due to our background and our upbringing, so we end up being classified that, so you are this because of your background, so we classify you as that. And so this is just one of the aspects that I have in my, there are a lot of other interesting aspects, but as I've been most of the places in SA, that's the part of me that is been kind of like pushed, that why don't we, as talk about inclusion, why don't we look at each other as people and love one another, and try to not tolerate one another, but celebrate one another for who we are, so that other people can happily express who they are. Then we might as well learn from them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senzo, and thank you for sticking to the time. So we will open to the floor, take questions, talk about how our cultures intersect, or where you feel yours should be shared. Jeremy, thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll share something about a life learning for me, and it's not an event, it's still a process. And it's about communication and understanding people who can't actually make themselves people. I'm a father, a parent, and a family member of a very disabled child, mentally and physically. And you have to make a choice early on whether you want to opt out, or whether you're actually going to stay in this and then do it and make it work. And what that means is that you need to actually, Stefan, my son, he's got Angelman syndrome, so he's nonverbal. He's got a cognitive ability of about a 2-year-old, and a numeracy of about 1-year-old, but incredibly sensitive emotionally, and understands 5 languages. And so becomes very frustrated because he can't make himself understood when he understands most things. So why am I sharing this? I mean, if you make a decision, and the parallel here is with what we're doing for sustainable. If we're wanting a sustainable future as a family together, we need to actually change our approach to understand, because being non-verbal doesn't mean they can't communicate. He's never going to have the capacity and the capability we as the other family members do have. And we deal with people who are never going to have that capacity and that intellect and those opportunities in our dealings and our dialogue with others. But if we make the choice to actually live in harmony as an industry and a community, we need to actually develop empathy, because that's what it's about, to try and understand what are the concerns, how do they actually make them known. And the thing about somebody like Stefan is you never know how he's going to react, because he does react, sometimes negatively, but that's because we're not understanding him, not because he's been naughty. And I think it's a learning that we're really having to do, and it's a learning that we're having to find in life, and it's something I'm sharing with you, is that about communication is actually sitting back and understanding and putting yourselves in those shoes and understanding what they're going through, what do they actually mean, even if they can't verbalize it themselves. In his case, he comes from a population group which is neglected, often abused, and sees no future unless people like myself actually see for a sustainable future, which means it has to be sustainable after we've died ourselves. Okay? And that's not too bad, not too different from what we're trying to do for communities after mining operations. But it has to take a very different paradigm shift from us as the people that are going to have to organize the change and facilitate the change. And it's about compromise, and compromise that often seems biased, that you as the understanding person, the capacitated person, have to do a lot more than others. But if you want in harmony, that's what it has to be. And it's a decision we have to take. So I thought I'd share that with you guys.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for that. Any takers for the mic? Oh, Shui.
Thank you very much, Dee, for the constructive discussion. If I'm here to talk about the Japanese culture, we should drinking together. And in this month, I had my big boss from United Nations University. He's Professor Nagao. So I had a chance to ask him. He was involved in developing this MPhil course. So I had a chance to ask him why he thought it's important to send Japanese people in this program. I was expecting something like Japan use a lot of meta from Africa, so we should be responsible. But he said, Japanese people are not good at speaking English, and we are basically patient. So I'm basically, what I do basically here is to listen to people. So I listen a lot here. Even if I have some idea or opinion, it's sometimes it's difficult to make it in to phrase to say. So I often just listen. So I think it's quite important to listen. That's the way we sort of put genuine interest to people and feel empathy. One of my colleagues, Ayanda, he's not here today, but he did amazing research on young entrepreneur and mining companies' enterprise development program. Mining companies often have paternalistic attitudes, so they are there to teach something instead of listen to them, listen to the potential innovative ideas. So I think if mining companies can be more open-minded to put this genuine interest to the people, I think that will make change.
Okay, thank you, Shuhei. So, comments, speakers, Patricia?
Yeah, I would like to come back to the racism issue. I was raised in the Netherlands mainly by parents who had a very global outlook in life. My mother was born and raised in Indonesia, even though she had a Dutch passport. My father was born in the Netherlands, but was raised in Curaçao in the Netherlands Antilles. And my mother suffered racism when she returned to the Netherlands from Indonesia. But basically, when I grew up, the Dutch culture didn't really do a lot of racism. Most of that had been sort of eased out of the culture, and unfortunately it's changing now. But for me personally, I have never given so much thought to racism until I came and moved to South Africa. Because you guys talk about racism all the time, and I don't think that's the way that it's going to disappear. Because you put so much emphasis on racism. If I want to appoint a student, I have to think 3 times whether he is or she is black or colored or Indian, and where do I put the Chinese? It's a big mystery to me. To me, the way I was raised, and I see nods from Sweden, we are just human beings, and we judge people by their actions and not by whether their skin or their hair is white or black or purple or pink with yellow streaks. It just doesn't matter. What matters is how you act. And I wish I had the recipe to turn South Africa into that, because then you would really be a rainbow nation. When I grew up, the Netherlands really was a rainbow nation. If you saw all the hairdos with all the different colors, but everybody was accepted. It was the Dutch tolerance. And like I said, unfortunately, it's changing now a little bit in the Netherlands. But it used to be so nice. And I think every country could be like that if we would all just ignore racism. Just think of each other as human beings. Who cares whether you happen to be born black? And most of the white people, they lay in the sun for ages to become darker.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. Edson?
Thank you. I had missed the forum the last 3 months, and just being here just reminded me of one of the things that I really appreciate about minerals to metals. Just to take on Jochen and the conception, the stereotype, the German stereotype that we have. I had the fortunate opportunity of being in Germany and I was quite amazed when I was listening to the news that they were building an airport in Berlin, which cost about 2.5 billion euros. And they started construction of the airport in 2006, and it was supposed to have finished in 2010. But as we speak now, the airport is still under construction. And they have gone over budget by about 3.5 billion euros. And the reason being is that there's been structural problems with the airport due to poor design, poor project management, and corruption. In Germany. So, so I was shocked when I saw it. I'm like, what happened to German efficiency and German engineering? And I mean, we all know the Volkswagen scandal. That's another corruption there. And Deutsche Bank is also involved in some scandals, more corruption. So it really got me thinking, like, wow, we sort of look down on ourselves as Africans and tend to put the more developed countries and the Western countries on a pedestal. And in a way, we shut ourselves out to our own ideas and our own indigenous knowledge that we don't have enough confidence to put them out and to stand with confidence and say, well, this is what we think the world should be. And I think with the whole movement that's been happening, where there's a rebellion that's going on against the global elite, you can see to the American elections and the Brexit, where essentially the world is saying, well, we are tired of Brussels telling us what to do. We are tired of some guys in Switzerland, Geneva, telling us how we should, develop. And I think that's what's important is an awakening for us as Africans to say, okay, sustainability, the principles, these are the principles, and this is how the West has defined it. But what does it look? What does it look for us? As us as Africans, what does it look, and how should it proceed? And I always had very heated discussions when I did the mineral law in Africa course, because it turns out the South African legislation was pretty much copy-pasted from the Canadian mining legislation. So if you look at it and you read it, it does not at all really reflect the values and of the indigenous knowledge and, for example, the African, how we feel about land, those fundamental values that make us, a people. So I think as we go to also talk about what's perceived about our over-discussion of racism, I think it's a lack of it's the black people failing to, because the English in our own African language, you would struggle to find expressions to define what is racism, because it does not exist. But as a failure to be acknowledged, to say, okay, you guys, you've got indigenous knowledge, and we acknowledge that you can contribute and you can express yourself, and we can consider what you think, not the other way where you feel like, okay, the system seems to always say, okay, you don't know anything. It's like a hard drive. We're gonna wipe out any data that's there, and we're gonna overwrite information. Then we can accept you as a person. And I think that's the biggest challenge, and it goes on to our how we how we, our education system, how we do research, and how we also needs to involve
Thank
the local
you, Edson.
communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that I know I'm a very white South African, and my son's nickname in his baseball team is Jick. Which in South Africa is a bleach, for those who don't know. But my husband was actually born and raised in Ireland, but he's taken up, we've turned our jobs in Australia. We all have South African nationality, and we consider ourselves to be very, very much South African in the first place, second, and African in the second place. And I just wanted to say to all my multilingual students, lumkela wena, ndivela ebai, ndiyakuqonda isiXhosa kancinci.
Thank you, Jenny.
This is the first time I'm doing this forum thingy. Unfortunately, through the history of South Africa, we have these injustices whereby a black person was seen as a thing and not as a human being. If you look at the mine tailings, especially in the Witwatersrand Basin, you're looking at the places where mostly your black people are staying, and most of that waste actually is coming from the affluent areas or your high network areas going into the locations. So for us to talk about racism, we have to talk about the issues of land. We have to talk about things as, do not see me as an object, but see me as Phumzile, a human being, a person who's able to think for themselves. Because now, for us to be able to reach that equal state whereby we can see each other and be able to work in everything else, the government has to introduce laws. Why was that to begin with? So you need to think, in a workplace, I'm more qualified, but I can't get a position simply because of my skin color. So these are the things that are very touchy, and when you talk about it, you can sense that there's that thing to say, you cannot talk about it. So if we just ignore it, when are we going to talk about it?
Thank you, Phumzile. Cleardwin, Corey, then Cleardwin.
Thank you very much for your input. For those of you unaware, the Thursday Forum is something that was started by Dee Bradshaw at the beginning of this year. And I think it's a truly fantastic initiative that often doesn't get the legitimization that it does being hosted in the engineering faculty, when many engineers are, if it's not quantitative, if it's not analytical, it doesn't add value to me. And I think already now, listening to Senzo speak about language, Shuhei talk about listening, to me, this is the type of listening that doesn't happen often enough. And when I look at the issues South Africa is happening, especially regarding universities, what I see there is a lack of listening. When people feel the need to communicate in those measures, clearly we failed with our ears originally. And very rarely, I've graduated last year undergrad, was I ever in a space where I was able to truly listen to my professor, not teach me thermodynamics, but actually tell me about her son in baseball, or tell me a little bit about their personal perspective, or hear someone like Edson understand what does land mean to you. And I can tell you many things about thermodynamics and entropy that I find fascinating, but not enough learning took place in this capacity. And Thursdays, nearly every Thursday in the chemical engineering department, on top of having a jam-packed schedule of running around, Tandazile, Dee, Rahul will come together and manage to facilitate discussions like this every Thursday, which I think is truly remarkable and I think deserve a lot of credit for. So I really appreciate being exposed to that and being allowed to generate these new perspectives that I think honestly go a long way to understanding. And to me, this is, I struggle a lot as an engineer to understand how we can solve some of these issues that seem so emotional. And this is one of the platforms where I immediately see, wow, okay, this is something that can be done. And I just wanted to say I'm thankful for that opportunity. Thanks, Dee. And
Thank you, Corey. Wicked problems for us out there.
You
Any
forgot Madam
systematic approach?
Toastmaster, President, Madam President.
Right, Cleardwin, then I don't get your name. Kavango. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ta. But Corey was seated. Okay. During the past year and a half that I've been at UCT, I've been hearing this vibe about transformation and the need to transform. And one of my greatest disappointments have been all the forums that I've attended. It seems like the recipient of the mic always says, it's Jeremy who needs to transform, not I. So Jeremy has to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G to transform. Then Jochen takes the mic. No, it's Shireen who needs to do A, B, D, E, F, G, whatever the sequence in order for transformation to occur. And plainly speaking, that has been very disappointing. No one has ever said, I am going to do this and that so that transformation can exist. And no one is ever pointing the finger at themselves that this is my own shortcoming as far as transformation is concerned, and this is what I'm going to do in order for that transformation to take place. I take a cue from our own country, listening to all the social conversations about racism, and if this were to change, that were to change. We've gone through, I think, what I'll call a full circle as Zimbabwe, and many people look at us and wonder, you guys can't even change a thing. A lot of people look at us. We've gone through, I think, full circle, to be honest. We've tried everything that possibly could be tried there, and which is the same path that South Africa is trying to tread on. That's not going to work. If your neighbor tried it and you want to try the same recipe and expect different results, scientifically we know that you can't try the same recipe and expect different results. It won't work. It's pointing us to a different direction, a different trajectory that we should take. I think the same thing, that's why these communities that are involved in mining and all these mineral to metal initiatives, maybe that's why things are not really moving the way that we want them to move. It's always trying to take the same thing, put a spin to it and expect different results, and that's not going to happen. So I'm simply saying, what is it that I'm going to do to transform UCT during my tenure at UCT? Not what is maybe the next person going to do in order for UCT to transform. And I've been asking this question, I've asked Jochen this question, what are we going to do differently next year such that we don't have a repeat of what happened this year and what happened last year? And honestly speaking, in the forums that we've been discussing, I haven't heard an answer that is satisfactory. So next year, if nothing is being done this year differently, I'm expecting that we'll be shut down for 2 months. And no one will care that there was 2 months shutdown when it's time for me to present my thesis. And I lost 1.5 months this year. Last year it was 2 weeks. So now it's like almost 4 months lost. So this is really something that is a painstaking part of the education process. What am I going to do in order for UCT to transform? This is the question that I think we need to be asking ourselves. Same when we get into the mining sector, what am I going to do for the mining sector to change? What am I going to do for M2M to change?
Thank you, Cleardwin.
Thank you, Cleardwin. There's Raul stealing my thunder. This is my show, Raul. I'm kidding there. Thank you.
Hello. Like Shuhei, I'm much of a listener than a speaker because I understand that if you pay attention, everybody can teach you something. Everybody has something that you can learn from. So I spend most of my time listening than actually speaking. I work in a male-dominated industry back in Zambia. I'm a geologist working in mineral exploration for Rio Tinto. Yeah. So I I find my work environment challenging in that, like racism and tribalism that other people have already referred to. We have a black people camp and a white people camp, where black people feel that, you know, the white person doesn't believe in them, and therefore, even though the white person is saying something useful that, you know, people should learn from, people are not paying attention because they feel that that's them, this is us. But I think we should listen, and where people are wrong, people should actually, you know, realize that somebody is wrong, and if it doesn't matter where the suggestion is coming from, we need to pay attention and actually learn from other people, one another. Back in Zambia, we have voted back in power the ruling party, the PF government, because people didn't want to vote for the opposition candidate because he's from a tribe that they don't want to be in power. So people were saying something like, we know the PF government has not done much, the president doesn't have much experience, and things are going to get rough, but it's better than having this other person because it's coming from a certain tribe. So I think people should learn, we should listen.
Thank
and
you.
Judge people by their action.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear many people talk very openly about many issues. You know, I live in Rondebosch. It's a very interesting neighborhood. I hear it used to be previously white, and then now I hear that crime has increased, and people want to make it a special area. So they want to go back to what it was before. So it's very exclusive. In my building, 2 days ago, there was a pipe leaking. Some apartment downstairs. I live up on the 4th floor. And somebody reported to the body corporate. Is that black guy up there, you know? You know, so I get a call from my landlord, you know, there's an emergency, you know, the neighbor is asking, there's a pipe leaking and apparently it's coming from your building. It's very interesting, you know, racism is real. You grew up, you're brought up in a way, you think in a way, you make particular friends, you have particular beliefs, and it becomes second nature. And you don't get to understand it because you find yourself positioned in a particular way. I lived in Europe for a very long time, Switzerland, one of those countries, and Netherlands. It's always interesting. I traveled through 5 European countries in a week. Somehow at every airport, I'm randomly selected, you know. Yeah. I don't know, it's a coincidence that I'm randomly selected at 5 different airports. At every time. Last year I was detained in Qatar for 4 days and deported again to another country because the guy wouldn't believe that I do work and lecture at UCT. You know, these things are very real. You know, when you're not positioned in a specific place, you don't experience it the way other people experience it. And what I like about South Africa is that people do talk about these things. It's not something which is hidden like it happens in European society, where everyone assumes that it's very normal, but people do suffer on an everyday basis. And culture is very interesting. I like eating. Food is so good that when there's no food, there's no life. And I think food is the place where people come together, but it's also where you can actually get to your own racism and your own exclusion of other people. What is the extent to which you can eat someone else's food? You know, in this room, every time I go to a meeting, I see people bring bread and stuff, you know. What happened to pap? You know, what happened to Mampani worms? You know, those kinds of stuff. I think those are things that are very important to reflect on. And to the point at which we are able to eat each other's food, we still remain in the same position in which we do remain.
Thank you, Divine. I am bringing some more Mopane worms to the next Minerals to Metals function.
I have a certificate that I've tried it in Zimbabwe, so I've got it.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So I'm not very comfortable speaking in front of a lot of people, so just bear with me. I'll try to voice my thoughts properly. I just wanted to say I used to think the same as what Patricia said, that we should just treat everybody like humans, and we shouldn't, we shouldn't be so set on racism and all that stuff. But the past 2 months at UCT have actually taught me a lot about that, and that we should actually, rather than trying to cover it up and rather than trying to ignore it and pretend that it never happened and nothing ever happened and everybody's just the same, it's not actually true. We should rather just acknowledge it and work with it. And the fact is that I think often as a white person, a privileged white person, well, okay, first of all, I used to not want to identify as a privileged white person because I feel guilty about it and I don't like being classified as this. But then I've come to realize that it's actually worth something admitting it, because it means, I understand that it is a thing and I understand what it means, and I understand that it places a responsibility on me to acknowledge that and to acknowledge that other people don't necessarily have the same opportunities, and that it is actually more important to admit it and to work with it rather than trying to deny it. And so I don't actually know where I was going with that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Olivia. So I'll give Patricia a chance to respond, then we will move to Don.
Yeah. Before we go there, sorry, Patricia. A fourth-year student speaking just reminded me that we still haven't chosen our winners for the fourth-year poster, which we need to do at some point before they decide to leave. So I'll leave Dee and to choose a panel to choose the winner while we are trying to decide this. So continue. Sorry.
There was a committee that organized this.
But the committee are biased because we have several students who I would like to win.
All right, Patricia?
Yeah, just a very short reaction, because maybe I didn't express myself clearly. What I mean to say when I say I feel I want to ignore racism, I don't mean ignore social injustice and ignore differences between people. I mean, indeed, everybody is an individual, but when I say I ignore racism, I mean I try to treat people equally until I've interacted with them, and then I will decide whether some people I will like, some people I don't like. But for me, when I say I ignore racism, I mean that whether I like someone or not is not related to the color of their skin or where they were born or whatever. For me, it means that I approach everyone equally, and then I see whether I get along with someone or not. And I certainly don't mean to ignore social injustices and history. That's, for me, something different than ignoring racism.
But then maybe it's ignore race.
Okay, ignore race. Okay, that's fine. If that's more clear for you, that's good for me to know, because then when but also when I discuss with other people, I know how to formulate. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you. And we're going to Dawn. We will carry this discussion for the next 10 minutes.
Sorry, Dawn, before you begin, I'm going to choose 5 impartial MPhil students and Louise. So Louise, who out of the MPhil, 4 other MPhils, Jeremy, Robert, do you want to volunteer to choose the fourth year poster? I'm just going to take you guys over. Okay, that's fine.
That was quick.
Yeah, you were going to go and show them the thing. So you are just there. You can't show because you're the coordinator. So it kind of works out well. So Louise is not volunteering. He's got no choice. Senzo, you're up. Shuhei, you're up. Corey, you're up. Frederick, you're up. All right. Too late. So you five, can you go to Nicole over there and choose your winner?
No, downstairs. Don.
I like the democracy which was on show there. I just want to say this is the most unusual event or occurrence for me because I've never sat in anything quite like this. And I think it makes you think. And I was struck by what Jeremy had to say because he told a very personal story which says something about him and his family. And I think we all exist at different levels and we all have different sets of experiences. On one level we're solving the problems of the world. At the other level, you're working within the range of your family, which for most people ultimately is probably the most important thing. And I think understanding some of these things and associated with people is so hugely important. If I had my time over again as somebody who was responsible for a large number of people, I would have made much more effort to understand the issues that the individual had and that affected him or her. Because I think if you can do that, you'll find out all sorts of interesting things about people and all sorts of very important things. And Jeremy told his story. I want to tell one very briefly, which affects my own family. I'm probably comfortably the oldest person here. And what I'm going to say is you never stop being a parent. And my wife and I have two daughters, both in their early 40s. And some months ago, the younger one of those was diagnosed with an aneurysm not in the brain, but in fact an aneurysm on an artery leading to her right eye. Now we know a bit about aneurysms because my wife had two of those, one in emergency a good many years ago, unfortunately came through them. So when Louise was detected or diagnosed with one of these things, it wasn't good news. But the medical system in Australia, which is very good, fortunately, said it was able to treat it. It wasn't an emergency. The quite disturbing thing was that the doctor said when he went through all the risk issues, in treating this, you may lose the sight of your eye, your right eye. And if you lose the sight of your right eye, the brain will shut down the sight in your left eye. In other words, you stand the chance, should this happen, of being blind. Now, the risk was low but real. Well, she had the operation done through, in fact, amazing stuff through an artery or vein in the groin and works up into the brain somehow, totally beyond me. And Jill and I were, along with her husband, were actually there when she came, soon after she came out of the anaesthetic. The first words she said, I'll never ever forget. She was as groggy as anything, and she said, "I can see." Now for us that was just profound stuff, the most profound thing I've heard in many a day, because it affected her and the family and the children and all the rest of it. My point, I think, is people have interesting things which define their lives. As people, responsible for people, knowing about some of these things is important and can help you do a much better job and be a much better supervisor and boss. Thanks.
Thank you, Don. Raul wants to interrupt me once again. I'll let him.
Sister, go. I'm going to give it to your sister now.
Okay, thank you, Raul. So I agree with the last speaker, Patricia. Yeah, we should start recognizing people as people, not a race. So my first step in doing that is on the application form. After your name, your surname, your date of birth, remove the race and all the other details. Then people will judge you on your qualifications, on your capabilities, not on your race. Why do we need the race on the application form? That is my question.
All right, thank you. I think there is some responses to that statement. So let's give a quick response before a new speaker. Senzo. No, he's responding. You're a new speaker. Oh.
Okay. No, I'll give my Matimba to respond to this issue. I think to address that one, it's something I've been thinking about. That it's quite tricky in South African context, honestly, because of we always go to the past injustices because of what they have done. I usually use my mother as an example that she wasn't allowed to study to a certain point. So in response to that, the reason the race is still need to be on is that due to the past, it's been hard to reach out to the other side to get the same qualifications as the other side.
Thank you, Senzo.
Yeah. So Matimba can take over.
Thank you. My apologies.
Well, I think Senzo said what I wanted to say, similar. But then I also think that removing the race wouldn't be quite a solution, because if you check by just reading someone's name, I can tell that this is African, so I'm certain that this is a black person, you know. So still, it's still quite tricky, because, I mean, we can have a Pumzile who's, I just know she's a black person, even if the race wasn't there. So that's what I think. I'm just not sure how can.
Yeah, I'm coming to.
I just want to make a response to this whole racial thing. When I was a student, many, many moons ago, I burnt the flag, I threw rocks, and we shouted down Piet Koordenhof and all of that type of thing. Okay, and I went out of university thinking I'm not a racist. Okay, experience in life, and it only came through talking about it and actually come into unpleasant discovery. It was that we all are conditioned by the way we were brought up, by the exclusions, and unless we talk about it, and unless we explore it, and unless we actually understand the other side and what's real to them, these are not perceptions, these are current realities to all of us. And the thing about the talking and exploring it is that my filters are removed, and I can start understanding, and you can start understanding. So I think it's a good thing that we actually do the discussion. It's not about seeing the colors of others, it's seeing our own blinkers and understanding our own limitations in recognizing those.
So what we're going to do now, we're going to take the last three speakers, then if there could be two volunteers to sum up the discussion from the audience. And I must say, if you have not spoken, you risk me asking you to sum up. I'm assuming the key words today was listen. So we were all listening. So any three volunteers, takers for the last speakers? Okay, one is gone there. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is quite interesting, I must say. I looked at Corey, I said, what are you guys doing? What is this? Why are you guys sitting around in a circle? And it's very interesting, but I actually really, really like it. I've heard about, sexism, racism, and, okay, let me stand. It's the short person. I actually like being short, by the way. But the other thing that I actually think we don't realize we do is the fact that we're drawn to people, or we like people, or we prefer people, because, and it's not China porn, but it can be unfair sometimes because of their charisma, because of their presence. You get what I mean? You have a group of students, and one is just well-spoken, and they're an extrovert. They're out there. They're very good at expressing themselves. And then you have the one person who's an introvert. They're not less intelligent or less likely to work hard. It's just they prefer to be in a corner, and we don't try hard enough to draw them out. And I've seen it a lot, it's like sometimes, and it's not shun upon because, hey, it's my preference, right? The racism part is a bit shun upon because why would you prefer a white person because you're white or a black person because you're black? But I also think it's also very unfair that, we tend to, choose people because, well, they stand out. And I think it's something we need to be aware of. I had to learn it because now, someone speaks good. They speak very well. They're eloquent. And I'm just easily drawn to that person. Or they're charismatic. And I once read this book, The Charisma Myth. The fact that it's all a myth. Yes, we think people are charismatic, yes, but it can actually be learned. I can learn to be charismatic tomorrow. I'm not born with it. But we constantly tell people, oh, you're charming, you're great. And we put people on a pedestal. And then you forget about the other people who aren't so out there. And I think for me, it's been a very big learning curve, to be like, yes, I don't put racism out there all the time. But what about this other area that I do? Just because I'm an extrovert and I'm out there, I tend to always just, I'll choose the same person over and over, and the other person who's an introvert gets shut out. And so I think it's something that we also need to be very aware of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I absolutely love that this session's happening. It's really quite magic for me to sit in. My background's in facilitation, so I have this love of just dialogue and how talking opens up new, I suppose, worlds. And for me personally, this is something I think about, or I feel deeply every day. And I'm aware I'm a white, privileged person, but I also realize I suffer in a way because I feel the difficulties people around me have lived with and live with. And I think about, in our society in the last 20 years, not enough has changed. Like, there's structural things that are still the same. We still pay domestic workers the same. We were working in a company a few months ago, which is a huge foods company, and the people at the very bottom probably get paid 3,000 or 4,000 rand a month, and the executives at the top take millions. And those things haven't changed. It's the structures. And just the talk about race is sort of this little icing at the top. It's that those fundamental structures, it's that they talk about the Gini coefficient in our society. We're one of the most unequal societies in how resources are shared. But as a white person, it is also a scary conversation because it's like, well, what do I do in this? Do I need to give up my home or my, the resources, I suppose, that I'm used to or comfortable with or have grown up with? But I had this beautiful realization or insight a few months ago, just thinking about other countries where, for instance, in Sweden, it's a much more equal society where resources are more equally shared, and tax is high, so every person pays 50% tax. And then people who are making a lot of money pay like 80% tax. But then there's kind of education for everybody, and there's so much more equality. And I realized for myself, I would much rather sign up for a society like that, where I had less, but I was safe and I emotionally felt the well-being of everyone, than be in a society like this, where maybe financially or with resources I have lots and I'm privileged, but there's an emotional toll to that as well, being the side that I'm on. And it's hard to know what to do about it, but I think I realized from that my heart's really with the wanting a better space for everybody. And I love the discussion. I feel like it's the first place to start opening it and talking about it. So thank you. It's very lovely.
Thank you very much. So the last speaker, while she gets
No
the
pressure.
mic.
No pressure, Olga. 4th year.
While she gets the mic, anybody who would want to consider volunteering themselves before I volunteer somebody. I do tend to be a bit authoritative if I don't get volunteers, and I forget titles too, so just saying.
Okay, so the role just made me even more nervous than I was before speaking in front of such a large and diverse group of people. But the thing for me that I guess stood out as a common element in quite a few instances this year is one of the comfort zone. I found that this was spoken about during our chemical engineering 4th year class forum, that people must get out of their comfort zones and relate to one another, like the white people must get out of their comfort zones and put themselves in the place of the black people. This whole issue on racism, that they must go to the townships, sort of one of the suggestions was go take a holiday there instead of going somewhere else and visit your friends, etc. And also today, with getting out of your comfort zone in terms of the minerals to metals theme, I guess it's just a thing to think about. How do we get out of our comfort zone? It's such an easy thing to say, whether it's in terms of cultures, whether it's in terms of race, whether it's in terms of the minerals to metals, making a change in the environment in the world. Where do we start? I mean, getting out of your comfort zone sounds so easy when it's just in words, but I mean, how does one impart that change? It's just so hard, and I guess one should just think about that. Like, every person should think about that within themselves all the time. How can they make a change by getting out of their comfort zone? Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that. So, all right, now we're looking for our good listeners that spent the time listening, going around. Any takers for that one? Sithe, are you volunteering yourself there? All right. Robert, thank you.
I was actually not volunteering at all. And I normally only talk after I've had 3 glasses of wine, and I've only had 2. But I guess to summarize, it's not too difficult. I mean, we've heard a lot about personal experiences, and it's quite clear that there's a real mix of culture here, which I think is really great. And it's what I really, all through the day, we've heard about this. We've heard different aspects, different visions in terms of what's happening in sustainable mining. In terms of this forum, it's fairly obvious that there are people that are listeners, and there are a lot of people that are talking. And I think it's good to actually have those people together. I'm normally a good listener, so I really don't have much to say. It's quite clear that the whole sort of racial issue hasn't disappeared in South Africa, and like a lot of people said, it's something that needs discussion. It needs to be talked about. I think we also should not forget that all of us that are sitting here are actually quite privileged. And I think that's very important to remember when we have these discussions. I think this discussion, this forum, is really great to have. It's the first one that I'm attending. And I hope it's not the last one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Clearly, I found the listener, because he said he's a listener, a good skill to have for this kind of responsibility. So I'm going to try and scout around for one more listener. Everybody's got their unlistening face on. That's what scares me now. Sue.
So I was worried about that, and it shows that you have an unfair age profile in looking for your summers uppers. So yes, I'm a listener. I very much am a listener, and I prefer to listen than to speak, although many of you wouldn't believe that. I've found it really enjoyable and interesting to listen to this conversation today. I think there's huge depth in the people in the room, and there's huge depth in our different life experiences. And it's been great to be able to hear those and to realize how much we should be able to celebrate the real differences and difference in life experience that we have, and that out of that we can build a richness in how we move forward. I found the discussion on racism and race and advantage and disadvantage, as I always do, really interesting. And it's so necessary, and yet has the danger of trapping us. And that's one of the things that we're really going to need to work forward very cleverly as South Africans. But now I'm putting my opinion in and not just summarizing, and that's not allowed. So back to Thandisile.
All right. Thank you very much. Actually, it's a trick that worked. Both Robert and Sue managed to sneak in their opinions while summarizing the events of the day. Since they don't seem to be willing to speak up, more listeners, I'm glad they got to get their piece in. So this brings us to the end of the forum discussion in this kind of a manner. But we have an open bar, as you were told. True to the nature of the forum, typically we would have coffee, but I suppose today you're supposed to loosen up and speak up more. I'd like to thank everybody who participated for sharing in some their very personal stories and some just giving their insights based on the different levels of interaction. I hope you got insight into what happens at the forum. It's meant to create cohesion. It's meant to let people talk and others listen. But at the end of the day, it's a group giving each other an opportunity to have dialogue. So to wrap up the day's events with some goodies for some fourth year posters, I'll ask Dee and Jenny, I'm not sure who is doing the vote of thanks, and to give out the prize. Thank you very much,
We've also got
everybody.
something lighter in mind. I don't want to burst your bubble again, Thandisile. We've got a video that you want to maybe look
Now
at.
I understand why they got an emoji that rolls its eyes. What can I do? Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Do the prize before the video or after the video?
Sorry, before the video. So we'll make your mind up.
Okay, so we will. I first want to give a vote of thanks to everybody here, and especially to the organizing committee and to Ra. Thank you for the day. Thank you for the work. Thank you for the emotional, intellectual, and physical commitment that you've all given. It's been a privilege to be part of it. Okay, now I've got to give the prize, but I don't know who it's to. Okay, so.
You'll be happy with it.
To Sinovo and Riverashi. Congratulations. Can we need a Congratulations.
Thank you. My partner will be very excited.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. What about the other awards? Oh,
We haven't finished the presentations yet. So tomorrow, once the other 6 have presented, then we'll do it as an MPhil
the
separate and
MPhil.
then a separate thing. So we'll give the student awards tomorrow, yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody.